Good morning and good day. Welcome to 3:15 o'clock, that very channel where the unspoken becomes unforgettable. Do you have the courage to explore the stories they always wanted to hide from you? This is not just a horror channel. This is a place where silence is shattered by secrets, and every story carries a weight of fear it was never meant to bear. The first story, dangerous water. The laws of physics seem to have ceased to function in this God-forsaken place. The rain, it wasn't just falling. It was living its own infinite life, filling the entire universe, blurring the line between sky and earth into a solid, grey, drumming mass. It had been drumming against our miserable canvas shelter for 3 days now. That sound, a monotonous, all-consuming drone, had eaten into my brain, become part of my consciousness, the rhythm of a hellish metronome counting down the last hours of our sanity. Mark and I were trapped. Our idyllic creekside campsite had turned into a watery prison. That very creek where we had so merrily drunk whiskey by the fire just 3 days ago was now a swollen, roaring monster. It had cut off the only road back, turning it into an impassable torrent of brown water, carrying debris and clumps of dirt. Cell service had died on the first night, along with the sunset. We were alone, or so we thought, the first night. The rain was just beginning to gain strength. Back then it still felt like an adventure. We sat in the tent, playing cards by the light of a gas lamp, its hiss the only sound challenging the rain. And then, through the noise of the water, I heard it, a sigh. Heavy, wet, as if someone had just climbed out of the river. You hear that? I asked Mark, putting down my cards. He listened, his broad, usually smiling face turning serious. Wind, he grunted, not very confidently. Just the wind dragging branches against the tent, but it didn't sound like wind. It was a distinct, heavy step, one, then another, the wet sound of a foot pulling free from the mud. The step slowly, deliberately circled our camp, just at the very edge of our lantern's light. We froze, staring intently at the trembling tent walls, trying to make out anything in the darkness. "Hey, who's there?" Mark shouted. His voice, usually so loud and confident, sounded weak and pathetic, immediately swallowed by the roar of the storm. The step stopped. A silence fell, terrifying in its suddenness. It seemed the rain itself held its breath for a few seconds, listening. Then it came down with renewed force, and we exhaled. "A deer, probably," I said, more to convince myself. "Or a bear. Damn it, we should have left the food in the car." Mark nodded silently, but his eyes said otherwise. No animal walks like that, with an even, measured pace, almost ritualistic. We tried to forget it, blaming fatigue, the stress of the bad weather, and our imaginations. We couldn't. The second night, the hell intensified. The rain lashed so hard it felt like the fly sheet would tear any second. The air inside the tent was stale, damp, and icy. We were silent. The cards lay forgotten in a corner. The JBL, the portable speaker, had long since died. Only we were left, our paranoia, and the same relentless drumming on the canvas. And the steps. They returned. This time louder, more confident. They weren't just wandering on the periphery. They came close. Squelch, squelch, squelch. A wet sound of flesh slapping against wet earth. I felt the blood in my veins run cold. Mark sat opposite me, his face white as a sheet, eyes wide, filled with pure animal terror. The steps stopped right outside the tent wall, on the side where our heads were. I saw the material bulge inward slightly under someone's weight. And then came a scraping sound, slow, lazy, as if someone outside was dragging their fingertips over the wet fabric, studying its texture, feeling us through the thin barrier. I heard heavy, raspy breathing, wet sniffles, as if the creature had a runny nose and couldn't breathe properly. I held my breath. My heart was hammering in my throat, ready to burst out. Mark squeezed his eyes shut, his lips silently whispering a prayer or a curse. I couldn't tell. The touching stopped. The steps moved away, but they didn't fade into the distance. They just stopped somewhere in the darkness, about 20 meters from us, and for the rest of the night we felt a heavy, silent gaze upon us. Someone or something was standing out there, in the pitch black, in the pouring rain, just watching our tent. We didn't sleep a wink. Morning brought no relief. The rain didn't stop. It only lightened slightly, turning from a hurricane into a dreary, dismal downpour. Forcing ourselves to crawl out of the tent, we saw it. The ground around our shelter was littered with footprints, dozens of them. They went in a circle, came right up to the tent, and then led back to the creek and stopped, as if the thing had entered the water or come out of it. But they weren't boot prints, or the tracks of a bear, deer, or any other creature we knew. They were barefoot, wide, unnaturally wide, larger than my stretched-out palm. 5 long, almost equal-length toes, ending in deep indentations from claws or nails, pressed into the mud with such force it was as if the thing weighed several hundredweight. The heel was deep and narrow, and the arch left a clear print, which meant it walked on 2 legs. Just like us, Mark threw up. I stood, numb, trying to comprehend the scale of this nightmare. These tracks led from the creek and back to the creek. They had circled us. They had approached us. They had touched us. "We have to get out of here," Mark rasped, wiping his mouth. "Right now. We'll cross that damn creek. Are you insane?" I pointed at the raging torrent. "It'll sweep us away in 5 seconds. We can't." "What are we going to do then?" "Wait for it to come back." "For them?" he said, looking around wildly. We spent the day in a feverish, almost hysterical flurry of activity. I tried to catch a hint of a signal, climbing wet, slippery trees. Mark, with trembling hands, tried to fashion some sort of weapon, tying his multi-tool to a stick, making a pathetic spear. We didn't speak a word. Every sound, every crack of a twig made us flinch and duck our heads. The sun, or rather a pale, blurred spot in the grey sky, began to fade. The third night was approaching inexorably. We both knew it would be the last. We felt it in our bones. Now we sit back to back in the center of the tent. The gas lamp is off to avoid attracting attention. The only light is the cold, bluish glow from the screen of my almost dead watch. In my hands is Mark's homemade blade. He has the large kitchen knife we brought for cooking. Pathetic. The rain continues its endless monologue. But now we listen through it. Our entire beings have turned into one big organ of hearing, and we hear. Squelch. Squelch. One set of steps. Heavy, wet, approaching from the creek, our old friend. But then from the other side of the camp another sound. Lighter, faster, slapping. As if something smaller but no less vile. Slap, slap, slap. Then another. From behind, from the forest, a third set of steps. Slow, shuffling, as if the thing was dragging a leg. They're surrounding us. There are 3 of them. They silently circle our tent, their steps merging into a creepy, discordant symphony. I can feel Mark's back shaking with violent tremors. His breathing is ragged and loud. Too loud. "Quiet," I hiss. "Breathe quieter." He tries to swallow, and the sound seems deafening to me. The steps freeze. All 3. The silence, broken only by the rain, becomes unbearable. I can almost feel their curiosity, their expectation, and then the tent wall right in front of me sags inward, hard, at face level. The fabric stretches, and on its wet surface the outline of something becomes clear, something wide and flat with 5 long protrusions. A print, just like the footprints on the ground. It had pressed its palm against our shelter. From another side, another wall bulges under a second palm. The tent creaks, the poles bending under the pressure. They're touching it, feeling it. From all sides, then comes a sound that freezes the blood in my veins. A slow, wet grating, as if someone is dragging a long, thick nail across the wet canvas. Once, twice, they're scratching our tent. I hear Mark start to chuckle quietly, insanely. It's the laugh of complete breakdown, the demise of sanity. The scraping stops. A pause follows. And then the most terrifying sound of all. A quiet, wet whisper right next to my ear, outside, separated from us by only a centimeter of fabric. A voice so unnatural it seems as if the very dirt has gained the gift of speech. It's gurgling, full of water and something else. Come out. Mark stops laughing. His breath catches, from the darkness. From another side, a second voice, higher, shrill, picks up, might play. And a third, low, guttural, completes the phrase, with us. I squeeze my eyes shut. This is the end, I know it. We won't live to see the morning. Our bones will also be found by the swollen creek, if anyone ever finds us at all. The tent shudders from a powerful blow. The seam at the entrance begins to rip apart with a quiet, treacherous creak. I press into Mark, bracing for the last thing I will ever see. And then my gaze falls on the watch screen. Above the notification shade, almost unnoticeable, a tiny, desperately desired icon is lit. 1 bar. 1 bar of service. An address flashed in my mind, the only one that could be of any use. With insane speed, stabbing with trembling fingers, I type a message, not thinking about punctuation, spelling, anything. Send coordinates 911 Appalachia Creek Trail 3 creatures not human tent help. My finger hovers over the send button. A sudden silence outside. The steps have frozen. The whispering has ceased. They've sensed something. The new game, hope. With a loud roar, the fabric at the entrance tears open. Through the rip, a smell rushes in, of wet rot, old blood and river muck. And I see it. A pale, long, bony arm, covered in slime and some kind of growths, with webbing between its grotesquely long fingers that end in black curved claws. It reaches inside, groping the air, screaming in terror. I poke the screen one last time. Message sent, and everything goes dark. The second story, E. The forest. It breathes. It remembers. It remembers everyone. It smelled of old wood, damp earth, and something else I couldn't quite place. Something ancient as these mountains themselves. We stood at the trailhead, squeezed into the narrow gap between civilization and the wild, endless forest known as the Blue Mountains. The air was thick, sweet from the scent of blooming rhododendron, and heavy, as if nature itself was waiting, watching us, and it also smelled of tea. A strange, pungent tea with woody notes. The smell came from a small, lopsided hut that seemed to have grown into the hillside. Its roof was moss-covered, and ivy crawled up the walls as if trying to hide it from prying eyes. On a faded sign, the words were barely legible. Information. Tea. Advice. "Will you look at that? A local attraction?" snorted Lex, my friend, jerking his chin towards the shack. He was sipping an expensive energy drink, and his bright new boots screamed of their urban origins. "Let's go in, grab a free map." And damn that smell. Intriguing. Unlike him, I felt uneasy. Something was off about this place. The silence. It was too oppressive for a sunny day. Even the birds sang in a muted way, as if afraid to break some invisible taboo. The door to the hut creaked open, and she appeared on the threshold. Calling her an old woman would be wrong. She was ageless. The wrinkles on her face weren't from age, but seemed like imprints of thousands of stories read, pushing through a thick web of gray hair woven into a careless braid. But her eyes were young, piercingly clear, the color of old honey. They saw right through you. They saw things you didn't even know about yourself. New travelers. Her voice was like the rustle of leaves underfoot. "Come in, my children. Have some tea before your journey." We stepped inside. The hut was a single room, cluttered with dried herbs, yellowed maps, and books with battered spines. A copper kettle sat on a small stove. That was the source of the hypnotic aroma. "My name is Auntie Abby," she said, pouring a smoky, mahogany-colored liquid into clay mugs. "I'm the keeper here, the guardian. I see people off and welcome them back." The tea was surprisingly pleasant, sweetish, with a slight bitterness and an aftertaste that was hard to describe. A forest in a cup. "We're planning a 3-day trip," Lex said, perking up and boastfully pointing to his huge backpack loaded with fancy gear. hiking the Eagles Ridge route, getting some cool shots for the gram. Auntie Abby looked carefully at his backpack, then at my more modest one. "Do you have a whistle?" she asked simply. "What?" Lex raised a skeptical eyebrow. "No, what for?" "I've got a 20,000 power bank, a satellite messenger." "A paper map?" she interrupted him, her voice losing its softness. "It's all on the phone." I felt the need to explain, shoving my hand into my pocket. "Offline maps, GPS." She shook her head slowly, and a shadow of something pity, no, more like an understanding of the inevitable, flickered in her eyes. "The forest here is alive," she said, and a chill ran down my spine. She said it not as a metaphor but as a statement of fact. "It breathes. It remembers. It remembers everyone. Those who come with good intent and those who come with kutsia, foolish arrogance. It will test you. It will surely test you." She walked up to me and, without asking, took the drawstring from the hood of my hiking sweater. Her fingers, dry and rough like bark, deftly tied a small, complex knot in it. "For remembrance," she said, and her eyes grew warm again. Then she turned to Lex. He smirked skeptically but held out the drawstring from his backpack. She tied him an identical one. Then she walked to an old dresser and took out 2 simple whistles on dirty cords. "Take them." "Thanks, but no need," Lex refused politely but firmly. "Extra weight." Following an impulse unclear even to me, I took mine and stuffed it into my pocket. Auntie Abby looked at Lex again, and this time her gaze held nothing but cold, stone-cold certainty. "If you get lost," she said, and the room grew very, very quiet. "If you realize you're lost, that the trail isn't leading you but leading you astray, stay put and whistle." 3 long blasts, clearly. "And wait." She paused, and her next whisper felt like an icy finger drawn down my spine. "Don't scream. Never scream. A scream calls for the wrong ones. They love being called. They always come to a scream." Lex snorted, but under her gaze his smirk quickly faded. He nodded, grabbed his backpack and went outside. Slamming the door, I lingered for a second. "Thanks for the tea," I mumbled. Auntie Abby looked at me with her honey-colored eyes. "Come back, child," she said. "And remember the whistle." We left. The first few hours of the hike were magnificent. The forest was truly beautiful. Sunbeams broke through the dense foliage, painting moving pictures on the ground. The air was clean and intoxicating. We walked briskly, Lex chattering non-stop, making plans for his footage. But by evening something changed. The forest closed in on us more densely. The trail, once so distinct, became blurred and overgrown. The trees began to look different. Their trunks twisted in unnatural poses, and branches thick with moss hung down like the arms of tired giants. The silence became oppressive again. "Strange," Lex said, frowning and poking at his phone. "GPS is glitching. The map won't load." I pulled out my phone. The same thing. The screen showed a complete loss of signal, though by all logic it shouldn't have had any from the start. "It's fine." I tried to stay calm. "We'll do it the old-school way. Follow the blazes on the trees." But the marks we'd seen in the morning, blue paint stripes, were gone. Instead, there were deep knife-like gashes on the trunks. They didn't look man-made. We walked for another hour. 2. The sun began to set quickly, casting the forest in crimson, alarming hues. We were clearly off course. Instead of the promised equipped campsite in a clearing, we came to a dry creek bed littered with strange, almost perfectly round stones. "Damn it," Lex cursed, throwing his backpack on the ground. "Where the hell are we?" "Quiet," I begged. His hot-headedness annoyed me, but the approaching darkness scared me more, and the silence that thickened with it. "Quiet? Are you insane? We're lost in some jungle. We need to call for help." He took a deep breath to shout. I didn't think. I just jumped on him and clamped my hand over his mouth. "Are you crazy?" I hissed. "Remember what the old woman said." "Don't scream!" He broke free, his eyes burning with anger and fear. "What old woman? She's a complete psycho. You're listening to her too." "We need help." She said not to scream. My nerves were frayed. She said a scream would call the wrong ones. Wrong ones? Bears. I'm not afraid of them. He prepared to shout again. At that moment, a sound came from the thicket, right from where we had just been. Not a shout, not a call, it was a whisper. Loud, carrying across the whole area, wet and full of promises. There were no words, only hissing, gurgling sounds, as if someone was trying to speak to us from under a thickness of water. We froze, clutching each other. Lex's anger evaporated instantly, replaced by all-consuming primal horror. The whisper died down. A dead silence fell, and then we heard footsteps, heavy, slow squelching in the wet earth. They were approaching. There were several of them. I frantically reached into my pocket. My fingers found cold metal. The whistle, the footsteps grew closer. We could already see bushes shaking about 20 meters away. I brought the whistle to my lips. My hand was shaking. I looked at Lex. He looked back at me with a silent question, his face twisted in a mask of panic. I took a deep breath and blew. One long, piercing sound that tore through the silence like a knife. The footsteps stopped. I blew a second time. A quiet, disappointed sigh came from the thicket. Something large and dark slowly backed away, dissolving into the shadows. I blew a third time, and then there was silence. Real silence. Oppressive but no longer hostile. The footsteps were gone. The whisper fell silent. We sat like that, huddled together all night without closing our eyes. We didn't see anything. We only heard something or someone walking slowly, methodically in a circle around the perimeter of our small camp, right at the edge of our flashlight's beam. Waiting. Waiting for our mistake, for our scream. In the morning, we were different people. A gray, joyless dawn found us sitting back to back, knives in our numb hands. The forest seemed like just a forest again. But we knew the truth. We tried to go back, but all trails led nowhere. Our compasses spun wildly. Phones were dead. By noon, we realized we were walking in circles again. We returned to that same dry creek bed. Despair began to creep in again. And then Lex, his face gray with fatigue and fear, looked at me and said quietly, his voice breaking, "I can't anymore. I can't." He stood up, his eyes empty, and took a deep breath. He was going to scream. Scream from helplessness, from horror, to call for death, just to make it end. I didn't have time to stop him. His scream, full of animal despair, tore through the silence like fabric. It echoed through the forest, faded, and then the forest answered. At first nothing, then a quiet, distant sound, as if someone had repeated his scream, but quieter, mockingly. Then another voice from another direction picked it up, and another. Soon the whole forest around us was ringing, hissing and grating with these inhuman cries. They were getting closer, from all sides. We started to run. Where, we didn't know. Just away from those voices. We ran, stumbling over roots, lashing our faces with branches, hearing something large and heavy crashing through the undergrowth behind us. It smelled of rot and wet fur. Lex was running ahead. I saw his back, his wildly swinging backpack, and suddenly he disappeared. Just fell through the ground. There was a short, cut-off cry and a dull thud. I ran to the edge of a small cliff hidden by ferns. Lex was lying below on the rocks, bent at an unnatural angle. He wasn't moving, and the voices were right there. I saw bushes shaking. I saw long, thin shadows falling on the ground from creatures I couldn't make out. I fell to my knees, frantically searching my pockets. The whistle! Where's the whistle? I found it. I clutched it like a last lifeline, squeezed my eyes shut, and blew with all my might. Once, twice, 3 times, and again that same unnatural silence fell. The voices fell silent, the footsteps froze. I sat sobbing over my friend's body, unable to move. And then I heard them. 3 answering whistles, clear, sharp, metallic. They came from somewhere to the right. Then another 3, closer now. Someone was whistling back. Someone was coming to my signal. A new hope, wild and insane, ignited in me. I whistled 3 times again. The answer came from right behind a wall of trees. I crawled towards the sound, leaving Lex, leaving everything. I crawled like a wounded animal, whistling, and then I saw them. Bright orange jackets, signal radios, serious tired faces, rescuers. I screamed, sobbing, "I'm here. For God's sake, help me." They came over to me. There were 5 of them. They lifted me up, wrapped me in a blanket, gave me water. "How did you find us?" One of them, the leader, asked. "We've been searching this sector for a day." "Are you alone?" "No, my friend. He's over there." I weakly waved my hand towards the cliff. "He fell. I think he's dead." I whistled. "You heard me, right? You came to my whistle." The rescuers exchanged glances. Their faces showed confusion. "We didn't hear any whistle, son," the leader said slowly. "We came to this clearing because our tracker picked up a strange, powerful signal from right here. And then we just found you." They led me away. On the path, already near the forest exit, I saw her, Auntie Abby. She was standing off to the side by an old oak tree watching me. Not the rescuers. Not the helicopter already landing in the meadow. Me. And she slowly nodded. Then she turned and disappeared into the forest. They found Lex. He was alive but with severe injuries and in a state of deep shock. He didn't talk to anyone, just sat and stared at the wall. When I went to see him in the hospital, I tried to ask him about what happened after his fall, about what he saw. He was silent for a long time, then slowly turned his impassive face to me. "They came to my scream," he whispered. They leaned over me. Their faces were made of fern and bark, and their eyes, like that old woman's, honey-colored. They looked at me and whispered. They said that I am part of the forest now, that I will remember. He pointed to his arm. On his wrist was a scar, clear even, resembling a complex knot. I never went hiking again. I sold all my gear. But sometimes, deep at night, especially when the wind howls in the wires outside my window, I think I hear a quiet, wet whisper from the very corner of the room, or a distant triple whistle somewhere far away, and I cover my ears with my hands and mutter under my breath like a mantra, Auntie Abby's words. "Don't scream. Never scream. A scream calls for the wrong ones, because the forest is alive. It remembers. And it always tests those who come to it with kutsia, even if they manage to get out." The third story. The quiet hour. Dust hung in the air thickly like a calico curtain, gilding in the rays of the sun setting behind the mountains. We drove into Crystal Creek, the oldest and, according to reviews, the most authentic campground in the Appalachians. In an old beat-up Honda, me at the wheel. Amanda, my girlfriend, with a map on her knees, and Jack, her younger brother, in the back seat, glued to his phone and mumbling something under his breath to the accompaniment of heavy beats pouring from his headphones. Finally, Amanda exhaled with relief, putting the map aside. "I thought we'd missed that turn." "No reception anyway," I nodded, slowing down. The road was narrow, potholed, overgrown on the edges with a dense, almost black forest that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The air, thick and sweetish with the smell of pine needles and damp earth, rushed in on us as soon as I opened the window. "Nice place," Jack grumbled, taking off his headphones. "The middle of nowhere. Nothing to post on Instagram here?" "That's the point, genius," Amanda retorted, turning to him. "To get away from all that digital noise. To listen to the silence." "Silence?" Jack snorted. "I'll go crazy from boredom." We slowly rolled down the main, or rather, the only alley of the campground. The sites were deserted. No cars, no tents. Just neatly numbered lots with charred fire pits and lopsided picnic tables. The unnatural silence was unnerving. It seemed even the birds sang here in a muffled, furtive way. I stopped the car by a small wooden house with a sign that read, "Administration Desk." The house was locked. A note, yellowed with age, written in a crooked, trembling hand, hung on the door. "Sites available. Money in the box. Rules on the board. Obey them." We exchanged glances. "Charming," Jack sneered. "Self-service. Hope the ghosts work on a voucher system too." "Stop it," Amanda cut him off, but a shadow of unease crossed her face. I got out of the car and approached a rusty box with a slot. Next to it, on a board under cracked plexiglass, hung a map of the campground and a list of rules. The usual set: no littering, no noise after 10:09 p.m., be careful with fire. And one last rule was highlighted in bold red font that had faded to pale pink. Rule 7, from 3 a.m. to 3:15 a.m. Quiet hour, for your safety. Absolutely no sounds, none whatsoever. I smirked. Look at that. A curfew for ghosts, I said, returning to the car. Must have a staff meeting at 3 a.m. Jack read it and snorted. Yeah, right. It's for tourists to keep the drinking down, or to scare off bears. What idiocy. Amanda said nothing, just looked intently at the forest thickening behind the trees. We chose the farthest site, right by the creek, which trickled sparingly between the stones. While I struggled with the tent, Jack and Amanda started a fire. The twilight forest quickly swallowed the last rays of the sun, and with the onset of darkness, the silence became even more ominous. It wasn't empty, but dense, heavy, as if something large was lurking and holding its breath, listening to us. Creepy place, Amanda said quietly, moving closer to me. It's like we're the only people in the whole world. Alone is the best thing to be, Jack parried, pulling a portable JBL speaker from his backpack. I'll fix that right now. He turned on some electronic track. The loud, deliberately mechanical music brutally cut through the natural silence, making us flinch. The forest itself seemed to contract in displeasure. Turn it off, Jack, Amanda asked. Don't! Why? The rules say after 10, not after 7, he grinned. Relax, sis, the music grated on my ears. I wasn't a fan either, but something held me back from protesting. That rule, the quiet hour, was stuck in my brain like a splinter. It was too absurd to be just a joke. Night fell completely black and velvety. We ate sausages roasted over the fire, drank beer, and gradually the uneasy feeling began to dull. Even Jack turned off the music, succumbing to the hypnotic effect of the flames and the quiet rustle of leaves. We chatted about nothing, looked at the stars, which were incredibly numerous here, far from the city lights. I fell asleep first, lulled by the fatigue from the road and the steady crackling of the firewood. I dreamed something restless, formless. I was running through the forest and someone was walking behind me. Not chasing, just walking, steadily and inexorably, which was even more frightening. I was awakened by Jack's voice. It was unnaturally loud, pompous, as if he was playing a role on stage. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the most solemn moment arrives. Time to test the local folklore. Time to break a taboo. I opened my eyes. It was dark inside the tent. The light from the fire had almost died out. Amanda was sleeping next to me, curled up. I looked at my watch. The glowing digits showed 2:59. My heart sank. Jack, don't, I said hoarsely, trying to figure out where he was. This is idiocy. Relax, dude. His voice came from outside. Let's see what happens. Maybe the old caretaker will crawl out from underground and give us a ticket. I heard him rummage in his backpack, and a second later the night silence was torn apart by powerful booming bass. He had turned his damn speaker on full blast. It was that same aggressive electronic track. I rolled out of my sleeping bag and tried to get out of the tent. Amanda woke up with a frightened cry. What? What's happening? Jack, turn that off! I shouted, scrambling outside. Jack was standing by the dying fire, holding the speaker above his head like a trophy, with an idiotic grin on his face. The screen of his phone, connected to the speaker, glowed brightly in the dark. Look, nothing's happening, he yelled over the music. Complete none. He didn't finish. At exactly 3:01 the music died. It wasn't like he turned it off or the battery died. The sound didn't fade, it didn't cut out. It was killed, sharply, irrevocably, as if the speaker's throat had been slit. One moment, deafening noise, the next, absolute all-consuming silence. A silence like I had never heard before. Everything fell silent, every single sound. No rustle of leaves, no chirping of crickets, no hooting of an owl, no babbling of the creek. The air became thick and cottony, pressing on our eardrums. I could hear the blood pounding in my temples. Jack froze, the stupid smile still on his face, still holding the speaker above his head. The smile slowly slid off his face, replaced by confusion and then by a primal animal fear. "What?" he tried to say, but no sound came out of his throat. He just soundlessly moved his lips. Amanda climbed out of the tent and grabbed my arm. Her fingers were icy, and then we saw them. They were everywhere, in the shadow of every tree, by every car in the parking lot, by the posts of the lanterns which had also somehow gone out. Tall, incredibly thin, absolutely motionless shadows. They weren't cast by anything. They were their own entities, dense, blacker than the blackest night. They had no faces, no features, only elongated, unnatural proportions. They didn't move. They didn't breathe. They just stood and waited. There were dozens of them, maybe hundreds. They surrounded our camp, stood along the road, filled all the space between the trees. They were watching us. We felt their gaze, heavy, sticky, devoid of any emotion except cold, indifferent expectation. One of them, the one standing closest by an old maple tree, slowly, with a barely audible dry creak, turned its head toward us. Where its face should have been was just a smooth, matte surface, but two spots of absolute emptiness, two holes into nothingness, stared at us. They reflected neither the moonlight nor the glow of the dying embers of the fire. They simply absorbed it. We froze. I felt goosebumps running down my back, my lungs constricting. I was afraid to move, to cough, even to breathe too loudly. Next to me, Amanda stood frozen like a statue, her eyes wide with terror. Jack slowly, very slowly, lowered the speaker to the ground. His hands were shaking. We stood like that for what felt like an eternity. Time lost all meaning. The world had shrunk to this clearing, to these motionless shadows, and to the oppressive dead silence. My brain feverishly tried to find an explanation. Mass hallucination? Carbon monoxide poisoning? But no, this was too real, too tangible. I felt their presence with every cell of my body, the freezing cold emanating from them, and the unbearable pressure of their attention. I looked at my watch. 3:10. Only 10 minutes had passed. It was impossible. I didn't know what they were waiting for. For us to move? To make a sound? Or were they just waiting for those 15 minutes to end? 15 minutes that had stretched into infinity. Suddenly Jack, who was standing closest to the forest, staggered. From fear, from unbearable tension, his legs gave way. He took one unsteady step back, and his foot crunched on a dry branch. The sound was quiet, a barely audible snap, but in the absolute silence, it sounded like a gunshot. All the shadows turned their heads toward Jack in unison. It was a synchronous, perfectly coordinated movement. The pressure of their gazes intensified, became almost physical, ready to crush him into paste. Jack froze, his mouth open in horror, a tear tracing a path down his cheek. I was sure something terrible was about to happen, that they would attack. But nothing happened. They just kept watching, waiting, as if giving him one last chance. No one else moved. We stood like that for another 4 minutes that felt like a century. I watched my watch, hypnotized by the movement of the second hand. 3:14:30. At exactly 3:15, a miracle happened. From the farthest edge of the forest, barely audible, came the chirp of a single bird. It sounded like a symphony, and the shadows instantly dissolved. They didn't leave slowly, didn't fade into the darkness. They just vanished, as if they had never been there. Simultaneously, the world reclaimed its sounds. The crickets began to chirp. The creek began to babble. The leaves rustled in the wind. The lantern on the post flickered and came on. We were left standing in the middle of the clearing, as if released from a vice. I took a first uncertain breath. The air was just air again, not thick cotton. Jack collapsed to his knees, his body racked with violent tremors. Amanda burst into tears, burying her face in my chest. "What was that?" she sobbed. "What was that, Alex?" I didn't answer. I couldn't answer. I just stared at the spot where a second ago a shadow had stood. My mind refused to believe it. "We're leaving," I said hoarsely. "Right now." We acted in silence with automatic, feverish speed. There was no question of neatly packing the tent. We crumpled it, shoved it into the trunk, threw our things in. Jack, still pale and shaking, helped without a word, avoiding looking at the forest. 15 minutes later, we were speeding back down the same narrow road. The car smelled of fear and sweat. No one spoke a word. I pressed on the gas, afraid to look in the rearview mirror. Only when we reached the paved road and the lights of the first roadside motel flashed between the trees did I allow myself to relax a little. "That's it," Amanda exhaled. We made it out. I nodded and automatically glanced at the clock on the dashboard, then at my wristwatch. Then I pulled out my phone. "Strange," I muttered. "What?" Amanda perked up. "The clock's..." I pointed to the dashboard. "They're behind." "Probably stopped from the shock," she suggested uncertainly. I shook my head, comparing the time on all the devices. The car clock, my wristwatch, Jack's phone, they all showed the same time, which was different from the time on the electronic clock at the gas station we were passing. All our clocks were exactly 15 minutes behind. We silently stared at this discrepancy, and the horror of that night, which had just begun to recede, washed over us with a new, chilling force. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a reminder, a counter. They hadn't just scared us. They had stolen our time. The longest 15 minutes of our lives, and the most terrifying thing was that we now knew for sure. They were real. And they are waiting for the next violation. The fourth story, the map that redrew our path. We left the trail, seduced by an old sign on a tree, to the waterfall, 200 steps. It was our first mistake, the last one that could be called innocent. The map I had studied so carefully all morning did not show this path. There was only a solid wall of green, denoting an impenetrable thicket, and a warning in fine print. "Lands not charted. Proceed at your own risk." Lisa had snorted then. "That's just to keep tourists out. I bet it's all trampled down by now." Max, our personal instigator and chief decision-maker for ill-advised ideas, was already turning off, waving his hand beckoningly. 200 steps, guys. That's nothing. We'll see something not on any Instagram photo." I hesitated. The air was thick and sickly sweet, smelling of rotting berries and damp earth. The sun broke through the canopy of leaves in rare, dusty rays. The silence was unnatural, deep, oppressive. No birds, no insects, but their enthusiasm was infectious. I stuffed the map into my pocket and followed them, suppressing a vague unease. We counted off 200 steps. Instead of the promised waterfall, only a tangle of moss-covered deadfall and an old pine, charred on one side, jutting out like a gnarled finger. Maybe they were giant steps, Lisa joked uncertainly. "Let's keep going," Max commanded cheerfully. 200 steps is figurative. Probably meant 200 more. We walked 300, 400, 500 steps. The thicket closed behind us, swallowing the trail we had left. The air grew even thicker, harder to breathe. I stopped to get my bearings. "What is it?" Max asked. I pulled out my compass. The needle wouldn't settle. It didn't point north. It spun wildly, as if teased by an invisible magnet, pausing for a second before breaking into its insane dance again. "It's glitching," I muttered, tapping the glass. "Electronics don't work here either." Max's phone showed a yellow X instead of service. Mine was dead as a stone, though it had been fully charged that morning. On Lisa's screen was only static, flickering in bars. The anxiety that had been slumbering deep within me awoke and dug its claws sharply into my gut. "That's it. We're going back," I said firmly. "Follow our own tracks before it gets dark." They didn't argue. Max's enthusiasm had faded. Lisa silently huddled into her light windbreaker, though the chill had only just now arrived. We turned around and started back, peering intently at the ground. We hadn't walked long, maybe 10 minutes, before I froze in my tracks. Stop. What is it? Max bumped into my back. I pointed a trembling finger at the ground ahead of us. The path we came on should have been here. It was. But our footprints, the prints of 3 people in trekking boots with aggressive tread, were gone. Completely. As if we had been carried here. In their place, imprinted in the wet, black soil, was another track. Clear, distinct, soul-chilling. They were the imprints of bare feet, human, but unnaturally long with bony toes and an unnaturally high arch. They walked in a neat single file, perfectly mirroring our path, stepping exactly where our prints should have been. But they were absolutely fresh, as if made a second ago, while our own trail seemed long forgotten and untrodden. They didn't lead to us. They walked behind us, mirroring our every step, every loop, every detour with perfect precision. An icy chill crawled down my spine. Whose are those? Lisa whispered, her eyes wide with horror. Max, trying to pull himself together, said with false cheer, "Someone's joking. Locals messing with us. Let's go, don't dwell on it." But his voice trembled. We walked faster, no longer hiding our panic. I kept looking back, staring into the green gloom behind us. No one. Only silence, pressing on my eardrums. But every time I looked down, I saw them. Those prints. They appeared right in front of us, as if emerging from the ground the moment my foot was about to descend. They weren't just following us. They were leading us. Our attempts to turn, to bypass, to confuse our pursuer were futile. We'd veer off to the side, fighting through thorny bushes, and within a few steps, on fresh, untouched earth, this trail of long, bare prints would appear again. They were always there, where we had just stepped. It was a chase in reverse. A terrible, inexplicable trap where we were not the prey, but puppets dancing on an invisible string. We were running now, without looking back, gasping, gulping the heavy, sticky air. Branches lashed our faces, leaving red welts. My heart hammered somewhere in my throat. We saw no path, saw nothing but these tracks, stubbornly, relentlessly pointing the way. The thicket suddenly parted. We stumbled into a small clearing, in the center of which lay a huge boulder, covered in moss and lichen. It was an unnaturally perfect, almost spherical shape, as if someone had polished it and dropped it here in the middle of the wild forest. The tracks led straight to it and stopped, and on the stone something lay, a white rectangle screamingly alien in this primal place. My legs carried me forward on their own. I approached and felt the world swim beneath my feet. It was the map. Our map. The very one I had crumpled up and thrown into the roadside bushes that morning, arguing with Max before we entered the forest. Someone had retrieved it. Someone had smoothed it out carefully and brought it here. I took it with trembling fingers. The map was crisscrossed with lines. They were drawn over the printed network of trails and landmarks. They were made with a bright red pencil, bold and clear. The red was unnatural, too vivid, almost glowing in the gathering dusk. The line led. From where we had left the trail, wound between the trees, exactly tracing our mad, chaotic flight, and ended here, at this stone. Points were marked along the line, and next to them, in a neat, bead-like script, Max looked back. Lisa cried, "They try to turn." This wasn't just a path. It was a protocol, a diary of our despair. And at the very end of the path by this boulder, an elegant, almost calligraphic signature was drawn in red pencil. It danced before my eyes, and I heard Lisa stifle a sob while Max made a guttural animal sound full of absolute, hopeless terror. Welcome home. In that moment, the silence shattered. But it wasn't a sound. It was its complete, absolute absence, reaching a density that became physically painful. The air shimmered, and from behind the boulder, a figure appeared. It was tall, impossibly thin, elongated, like a shadow cast at an unnatural angle. Its contours flickered, merging with the trees, and only for a second could you make out something, resembling a human body, but assembled from twigs, shadows, and the darkness that lives under tree roots. It was barefoot. Its legs, those same long and bony ones, stood on the ground but cast no shadow. It didn't move, just stood and watched. It had no face. Where a face should have been was only a smooth, pale oval. And on that oval, slowly, with a quiet rustle, that same calligraphic signature appeared, glowing with the same venomous red light. I recoiled. The map slipped from my fingers and caught on a thorny bush. We stood frozen, paralyzed by this vision, this embodiment of the forest itself that had led us here, that had guided us all this time. It did not pursue us. It simply raised one of its incredibly long arms and slowly, with an air of unquestionable calm, pointed at the boulder. We didn't understand. We couldn't think. Then a sound came. A creak. Loud, metallic, like a rusty door on hinges being opened for the first time in 100 years. The stone moved. It slid aside, revealing a black earthen pit descending deep underground. From it wafted the smell of old, damp earth, rot, and something sweetish, familiar. The smell of our own fear, which we had been exuding all these hours, and then we understood. Welcome home. It wasn't a metaphor, it was an invitation, or an order. The creature took a step forward, just one. Its bare feet left no prints on the ground. It simply hovered over the soil. Max screamed. An inhuman, ragged scream. He turned and bolted back into the thicket. Lisa, sobbing, dashed after him. The instinct for self-preservation, stronger than reason, made me run too. We tore through the forest, blind with terror, not choosing a path. I heard only my own rasping breath and the footfalls of my companions. I didn't look back. I was afraid to look back. Suddenly Max's scream was cut short, abruptly on the highest note. A dull thud sounded and silence fell. A moment later, Lisa cried out. Her scream was short, cut off, replaced by a strange, rustling sound, like someone dragging a sack over dry leaves. I ran until there was no air left in my lungs, until my heart felt ready to burst from my chest. I tripped over a root and fell face first into the rotten leaves. I lay there, unable to move, listening to the blood pounding in my ears. The silence returned. The same oppressive absolute. I raised my head. It was the familiar forest all around. Through the trees I could see the trail. Our trail. The one we had left. I was saved. With a sob of relief, I pushed myself up onto my knees, then to my feet, taking a convulsive breath. I was almost there. I took a step toward the trail, toward salvation, toward the world. And my foot stepped into something wet and viscous. I looked down. Before me, fresh and clear as if just made, lay the imprint of a bare, unnaturally long foot. It pointed away from me, toward the trail. I turned around slowly. Behind me, in a perfect chain leading from that black pit by the boulder, through the entire forest, through the thicket, through my escape, stood the same prints. They were following me. They were following right behind me. They repeated every step of my mad flight. And they were fresh, made just now, and I understood the most terrible thing. I understood why the tracks always appeared ahead of us. We weren't running from it. We were running ahead of it. It wasn't pursuing us. It was walking in our footsteps. It let us run so we would pave the way for it, so we would lead it home. I heard that same creak again. Quiet, quiet, coming from somewhere behind. But now it was closer, much closer. I slowly, with effort, turned my head. From behind the trunk of an old oak 20 paces from me, a shadow appears. Tall, thin. Its pale, faceless oval is turned toward me. On it, 2 red dots ignite, like pencil strokes forming into soulless eyes. It stands and waits. It waits to see where I will place my next step. To step exactly footprint for footprint. My foot is frozen in the air. I cannot lower it. I cannot move from the spot, because I know it doesn't matter where I step. It will already be there, and I hear a quiet, rustling voice that sounds not in my ears, but right inside my head. It sounds as if it's composed of the rustle of leaves, the creak of branches, and the beat of my own heart. Next step, traveler. The next step, home. The 5th story. Echo in the darkness, done. Just one night, just one damned night was all that separated us from a normal life. We, me, Leo, my friend Ben, and his girlfriend Sarah, had gone on this hiking trip to celebrate the end of the semester. We'd chosen a remote spot at the foot of the old mountains, where the map showed abandoned mines from the turn of the century. The place seemed perfect. Pine-scented air, a crystal-clear stream, a complete absence of people. The first day was beautiful. We set up the tent on a small clearing, lit a campfire, laughed, and shared our summer plans. Ben, an avid photographer, was snapping pictures of everything, while Sarah, the most cautious of us, grumbled that the place was too remote, that even the birds weren't singing. Leo, our hiking expert, just brushed her off. Relax, Sar, this is total chill. But as darkness fell, the atmosphere changed. The silence became oppressive, heavy, not peaceful. The air cooled unnaturally fast. We crawled into the tent, sleeping bag to sleeping bag, and I almost fell asleep to Ben's monotonous retelling of some sci-fi novel's plot. I didn't wake up immediately at the first stone hitting the tent fly. Thought it was a pine cone. The second impact was stronger, sharper. The fly sagged, and a sound came from outside. Not an animal's growl, not a human scream. Something in between, low, hoarse, gurgling, as if a creature was trying to speak with lungs full of water. We froze. Leo was the first to snap out of it, shoving his flashlight toward the sound. A shadow darted behind the fly, large, very large, on 2 legs but hunched over. "Hey, who's there?" Ben shouted, his voice trembling. In response came a heavy, shuffling breath and a new stone, hitting the entrance zipper dead on. Then another and another. This wasn't a blind attack. It was a bombardment. Accurate, deliberate, malicious. Sarah screamed, pressing herself against Ben. Leo, pale but collected, started rummaging in his backpack. The flare. Where's the road flare? I helped him with trembling hands. Outside, the creature made a new sound, a cross between grinding teeth and a crow's caw. It was circling the tent, shuffling across the ground. I saw its shadow, a tall, awkward figure with unnaturally long arms. Leo finally found the flare, a long metal tube with an igniter. He struck it, and a bright flame lit up the tent's interior. "Open it," he commanded me. Overcoming paralyzing fear, I yanked the zipper. At that same moment, Leo thrust his arm with the burning flare outside and began waving it wildly, making warlike cries that held more fear than threat. For an instant, I saw it. It stood 10 meters away, hunched, shielding itself from the light with long bony paws. Its skin was an earthy gray, peeling, like a corpse that had lain in water for a long time. I couldn't make out a face, just a dark mouth cavity and the glint of light on something wet. It hissed, gurgled, and then turned around, clumsily but quickly shuffling into the forest, disappearing into the dark. We didn't sleep a wink until morning. We sat huddled together, listening to the silence, which now seemed ominous. Every rustle, every cracking twig made us flinch. With dawn came a false sense of security. We emerged from the tent, looking around. No one. The clearing was littered with stones of various sizes. What the hell was that? Ben broke the silence first, his face gray from lack of sleep. A bear? A rabid bear? Leo suggested uncertainly. Bears don't walk like that, Sarah immediately countered. Her eyes were red from tears. And they don't sound like that. She was the first to notice them. She pointed a finger at the ground near the forest's edge. Look, we approached. Imprinted in the damp soil were footprints, human ones, 20 centimeters, size 11, a clear impression of a foot with 5 toes. But from the tips of the toes stretched long, deep grooves, as if on each foot were long, curved claws, like those of a large bird or reptile. My heart sank. Leo dropped to his knees and carefully, as if afraid to scare it away, measured the print with his hand. This isn't an animal, he muttered. It's something else. The tracks led from the forest to our tent and back. A clear, unhurried chain. As if spellbound, we followed them. They led us through the thicket, past an old, half-collapsed barracks to the mountainside. There, almost hidden by blackberry bushes, gaped a black hole, the entrance to a mine shaft. It was blocked by a massive, rusty, wrought-iron grill, apparently installed by the miners long ago. Several bars were partially broken or bent outward, forming a passage large enough for a person to crawl through. From the darkness behind the grill came a smell of mold, damp earth and something sweetly putrid. It was unbearably frightening to look in there. It seemed the very darkness was thick or dense or alive. That's it, Sarah said firmly. We're leaving. Right now. I won't stay here another minute, we all silently agreed. The horrific attack, those tracks, this mine shaft, it all screamed one simple thing. We had to run. We returned to the clearing and began, in a feverish hurry, almost without speaking, to take down the tent, shove our things into the backpacks. The atmosphere was tense as a bowstring. Each of us was afraid to admit one thing. We felt watched. Someone was observing us from the thicket. I was fastening my backpack when I heard it, first a quiet whisper, barely audible. Then louder, a scream, piercing, full of absolute animal terror. Help! It's dragging me into the mine. Help, Ben! Leo, my name. It was Ben's voice, his exact voice, with that characteristic hoarseness he gets when he's very nervous. The scream came from the direction of the mine shaft. We all froze. Leo dropped the tent's carabiner. Sarah gasped, covering her mouth. I turned around, searching for Ben with my eyes, and I saw him. He was standing 2 meters from me, pale as death, his eyes wide open. He had heard it too. His lips trembled but were sealed. He wasn't screaming. He couldn't make a sound from terror. The scream repeated, more desperate, more real. It came from behind that rusty grill, from the very depths of the black hole. Ben! Leo, for God's sake! It's got me! It's pulling me deeper. Don't leave me. It was perfect. Every intonation, every crack, an exact copy. But beneath it lay an icy, inhuman mockery. This was the ultimate horror. Not just a monster, but a monster that played with your mind, that knew your deepest fears and turned them inside out, using the voices of your friends. Ben took a step forward, his face twisted in a mix of horror and incredible pity. That's me. He whispered. No, Sarah shouted sharply, grabbing his arm. That's not you. That's it. It wants us to go back. But if it's not me, then who is screaming? His voice broke. Maybe there's someone else. Maybe there was someone else at the campsite. The logic of desperation was contagious. For a second, even I thought it was possible. That some other real Ben was down there in the dark. It's a trap, Ben, Leo said quietly but very firmly. His face was hard. We're leaving, immediately. We can't help him. How can't we? Ben shrieked, pulling his arm free. It's me! Do you hear? It's me down there! I'm begging for help. Again the scream, now turning into sobs, as if the creature sensed our doubts and played on them. Don't go. Please. It's here, with me. It's looking at me. Ben lunged toward the mine shaft. It was pure instinct, a mind clouded by terror. Leo and I barely managed to grab him. Let me go. It's me. I have to help myself. He struggled in our grip, madness in his eyes. It's not you. Leo shook him. Understand, it's not you. Suddenly the screams from the shaft stopped. A ringing silence fell, more terrible than the previous sounds. We froze, listening. Even Ben quieted down, breathing heavily, and then a new sound came from the darkness. Quiet, tender, familiar to the point of tears. Sarah's voice. Ben, honey, I'm here. I'm in trouble. Help me, come to me. It's gone. I'm so scared alone. Sarah gasped, recoiling. Her own voice, her intonations, her way of drawing out words, everything was copied with frightening accuracy. The creature was studying us. It was choosing the most vulnerable spots. See? Leo whispered, looking at Ben. It can do her too. It's deceiving us. Ben finally went limp. The madness in his eyes was replaced by emptiness and a cold, bone-chilling fear. He understood. We all understood. We ran. We left almost all our things, only taking the backpacks on our shoulders. We ran down the trail that led back to civilization, stumbling, gasping for air. There were no footsteps or cries from behind. Only silence, which now pressed down even harder. We ran for maybe 20 minutes before Leo raised his hand, signaling to stop. Stop. He was breathing heavily. Listen, we froze. The forest around us was quiet. Too quiet. What? Sarah exhaled. We're going in circles, Leo said, a desperate note in his voice. Look. It was a pointed, old, broken branch by the trail. I'd noticed it when we were running away. We passed this and came back to it again. We walked for another 10 minutes, now trying to go straight, checking the compass on Leo's phone. The needle trembled, pointing north. We were walking north, but after a while we came back to the same broken branch. And then we heard it again, first a whisper, right from behind the trees to our left. Leo's voice, but strained. Guys, I hurt my leg, can't walk. Don't leave me. We didn't stop. We ran faster, covering our ears with our hands, but the voice penetrated right into our skulls. It didn't come from one point. It surrounded us, reflecting off the tree trunks, creating a creepy, multi-voiced echo. Help. It's close. I see it. Leo's voice turned into a moan. Leo himself was running beside me, his face twisted in a grimace of rage and fear. Shut up! He screamed into the forest. Shut up! But the voice kept calling, pleading, describing the horrors happening to him in the forest. Then it fell silent, and was replaced by another, a child's cry. Weak, plaintive. It reminded me of my younger brother's crying. The creature couldn't know that. No one could know that. It was impossible, except for one way. It could get inside my head and pull out the most painful image. I stopped, hands on my knees, starting to feel sick. We were trapped, not just physically in this cursed forest. We were trapped by something that could tear our minds apart, playing on our deepest attachments and fears. It wasn't just going to kill us, it was going to play with us. And the game was only just beginning. We were completely lost. The sun was setting, casting long, ugly shadows. We came out onto a familiar clearing. Our abandoned tent, our scattered things, and the black maw of the mine shaft, waiting for us at the end of the trail like a gaping mouth. We stood there, devastated, understanding that running was useless. It wouldn't let us leave, and then from the shaft, loud and clear, came my own voice, full of genuine, soul-freezing terror. Guys, I'm here. I found a way out on the other side. It's safe here. Come to me. Run to me, hurry! I was silent. I looked at my friends, and I saw the same struggle in their eyes that Ben had had before. Pity, horror, doubt. What if it's true? What if it really is me? What if there's a chance? The voice from the shaft called again, more insistent, more desperate. It was so believable, so convincing. Leo slowly turned to me. His eyes were empty. How can we know, he whispered, that the you with us now is the real you? His words hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. Sarah and Ben recoiled from me, their faces twisted in a new, fresh horror. The paranoia sown by the creature had sprouted instantly. Leo, it's me, I squeezed out, but my voice sounded foreign and weak even to me. I swear. It was swearing with my voice 5 minutes ago, Leo coldly parried. His hand clenched a knife he had pulled from somewhere. From the shaft came my voice again, now crying and pleading. They doubt you. Run to me. There's another way out here. I found it. Save yourself. It was genius and horrible. It was dividing us, making us see a monster in each other. I saw Ben clenching a heavy rock in his hand, his gaze darting between me and the dark hole. "Enough," Sarah suddenly shouted. Her voice trembled, but there was steel in it. "It's playing with us. It wants us to kill each other or walk into its mouth. We won't give in." She looked straight at me, peering, trying to find something familiar in my eyes. "Prove it's you. Say something it can't know," I thought frantically, my brain refusing to work. Something personal, only known to the three of us. In our second year, I began, stammering. We were celebrating in the dorm. "Leo, you tried to light vodka on fire on the windowsill and almost started a blaze. We put it out with a blanket. And Ben then, enough!" Leo cut me off sharply. The knife in his hand lowered. Recognition flashed in his eyes. "It's him." The tension eased for a second, but the cries from the shaft didn't stop. My voice was now shrieking hysterically, pleading, threatening, sobbing. It was driving us mad. "We can't stay here," Ben said, covering his ears with his palms. It will drive us insane." "Running is useless," Leo stated grimly. "It won't let us. It herded us here." He looked at the rusty mineshaft grill, at that black inviting hole. "Then there's only one way out." "No," Sarah cried out. "Are you insane? We're not going down there." "What do you suggest?" Leo's voice became sharp. "Wait for it to come for us again tonight? Or until we kill each other, mistaking one another for the monster? It's stronger than us in the forest. But down there," he nodded toward the shaft, "maybe we'll have a chance. Maybe its lair is there. Or it's tighter. Or we can trap it there." It was a crazy idea, but there was no other. The cries from the shaft continued, and with every second they sounded more insistent, more triumphant. It knew we wouldn't accept its offer. We silently gathered the scattered things. Flashlights, the knife, the remains of the flare, rope. Every step was incredibly difficult. It seemed the very atmosphere around the shaft was thicker, heavier, pressing on our ears and clouding our minds. Leo was the first to approach the grill. He shone his flashlight inside. The beam was lost in the thick darkness, illuminating only the first few meters of a descent shored up with rotten planks. "Looks like an adit," he muttered. "Slopes downward." He climbed over the bent bars and disappeared into the darkness. Sarah, trembling, followed him. Then Ben. I took a deep breath and stepped in after them. The darkness swallowed us instantly. The air became cold, damp, and stale. It smelled of rust, rot, and that same sweetish, nauseating smell. The cries of my voice stopped, as if on command. Now we were surrounded only by a ringing, absolute silence, broken by the crunch of our footsteps on the crumbled ground and our rapid, uneven breathing. We walked in single file down a narrow tunnel. The walls were shored up in places with rotten beams. Here and there, remnants of rails were visible. The flashlights picked out terrifying details from the gloom. An old, rusted pickaxe, a minecart grown firmly into the earth. Some rags crumbled to dust. The tunnel began to narrow and slope more steeply downward. We walked in silence, prisoners of our own paranoia. Every rustle, every falling pebble made us turn around, press ourselves against the walls, peer into the darkness closing in behind us. Suddenly the tunnel widened, turning into a small cave, obviously of natural origin. In the middle stood a strange object, a sort of table crudely knocked together from crates. On it lay bones neatly arranged, not animal bones, small, thin, human. Next to them were several strange, curved objects like ritual knives carved from stone. "What is this?" Sarah whispered, and her whisper echoed loudly through the cave. "His collection," Leo answered, running his flashlight beam over the table, or his dining table. Suddenly Ben, who had been standing silently at the cave entrance, gasped. "Guys," his voice broke. "Look," we turned. On the wall, right by the entrance, someone had made a fresh inscription. It was drawn with something dark and sticky that smelled of blood. "You are already here." And below, smaller, in the same substance, "I see you." We froze, paralyzed with horror. It was here. It knew we were here, and it was watching us right now. Leo was the first to recover. Back. Now back! We bolted for the cave exit. But we had only taken a few steps when part of the ceiling behind us collapsed with a crash, blocking the passage we'd entered through. Dust choked our breathing. We were trapped. It's him. Ben screamed. He blocked the exit. At that same moment, from one of the side passages we hadn't noticed, came a sound. Heavy shuffling breathing. And then a voice. This time it was Leo's voice, but distorted, full of evil, inhuman mockery. Thank you for coming. I've been expecting guests. A figure emerged from the darkness, tall, hunched, long arms with pale, bony fingers and those same curved claws dragged along the ground. Its skin was the same earthy gray, dead color. But the most terrible thing was its face, or rather the lack of it. Where a face should have been was only a smooth, eyeless, noseless, mouthless mask of flesh. And this silence was even more frightening. It spoke with our voices but had none of its own. It moved toward us slowly, blocking the only remaining free passage, a narrow crawl space leading deeper into the mountain. Leo drew his knife. Fall back, he commanded, but there was nowhere to fall back to, only deeper into the mine. We retreated, stumbling over stones, not taking our eyes off the approaching creature. It was in no hurry. It was savoring the moment. Sasha, don't leave me. It whispered in Sarah's voice right by my ear, even though her lips were clenched. I cried out, recoiling. Hallucinations? Or could it project voices directly into our heads? We retreated down the narrow corridor. The creature followed us, keeping its distance like a shepherd driving sheep into a pen. The air became more and more stifling. I realized where it was leading us. To a dead end, to the slaughter. Suddenly the tunnel ended. We found ourselves in a small, round chamber, a kind of stone sack. Behind us in the passage stood it, filling it completely, its faceless head tilted as if studying its prey. It's over. Ben moaned, leaning against the wall. Leo, knife in hand, took a step forward. His face was twisted in a grimace of despair and fury. Come on, you bastard! Come on! The creature made a gurgling, rasping sound like laughter. It took a step forward, and at that moment Sarah, who had been standing silently behind us, suddenly cried out, "The flare!" Give me the flare. Leo, without taking his eyes off the monster, shoved his hand into his backpack and handed her the homemade flare. Sarah struck the lighter. The flame flared up, blindingly bright in the absolute darkness. The creature recoiled, making a hissing sound like a bursting bubble. It hated the light. It was a creature of darkness. Keep it on him, Sarah shouted, directing the flare toward the monster. The ice broke. Leo lunged forward, brandishing his knife. The creature, blinded by the light, retreated a step, shielding itself with its clawed paws, and then I saw it. Right at my feet, in the floor, almost buried in rubble, stuck an old rusty metal rod, part of some ancient machinery. A perfect wedge. Leo, here! I shouted. Leo understood instantly. He feigned an attack, forcing the creature to step forward, and at the last moment jumped aside. At the same instant, Ben and I kicked with all our might at one of the supports holding up the low passage's ceiling. A crack sounded. The ceiling of the corridor collapsed with a roar, blocking the passage with a pile of stones and earth. We heard a furious gurgling shriek from the other side. We had locked it in, for a while. We stood there, breathing heavily in complete darkness, save for the flickering light of the flare in Sarah's hand. From the other side of the collapse came furious, muffled sounds. It was trying to dig through the rubble. We did it. Ben exhaled. Not for long, Leo said grimly. Look for another way out, quick. We started feeling the walls of our stone prison, and suddenly I noticed a faint draft. It came from behind a pile of stones in the corner. We began quickly clearing it, throwing stones behind us. Behind it was a narrow, almost vertical fissure in the rock, leading upward. This goes up, Leo said, one at a time. I'll go last. Sarah went first, then Ben. I took a last look at the collapse. The stones were moving. It was almost through. I squeezed into the fissure. It was narrow, tight, the stones scraping my face and hands. I climbed, pushing with my feet, feeling the noise growing behind me. I heard Leo's cry, hoarse and full of pain, and a terrible, triumphant gurgling sound. It had reached him. I didn't look back. I climbed upward, toward the light Ben had seen, feeling for the edges of the fissure. A strong hand grabbed my wrist and pulled me up. It was Ben. I tumbled out onto cold, wet earth. It was night. It was raining. We were on the surface, 100 meters from the mine entrance. "Leo," Sarah whispered, her face streaked with tears and rain. He distracted it," Ben said with difficulty. "Threw a stone so it would go for him, so we could make it." We sat on the ground, unable to move, listening as more and more desperate, and then finally fading, sounds of struggle came from underground. And then silence fell. We had made it out. We had miraculously survived. We walked in silence through the same forest that now seemed just a forest. The rain washed the dirt and blood from us. We didn't look back. A few hours later, we reached a road. A car picked us up. We were silent the whole way. Weeks passed. We tried to return to life, but something inside was broken. We didn't talk to each other. The memories were too painful. One night, I woke up to a sound. At first I thought I had imagined it, but no. It was a quiet, barely audible whisper. Leo's voice. It didn't come from outside. It came from under the bed. "Got out," the voice whispered. "Crawled out. Thanks for leaving me alone with him. I've learned to play now, too. We'll come visit soon." The sixth story. The mountains, the fear, and the mysterious phone. The mountains do not forgive mistakes. They absorb them, like dark sandstone absorbs rain, only to reveal years later the bones of those who erred. We knew this. Samantha, Miranda, and me, Katie. We weren't just friends. We were a team, forged by years of training, mutual trust, and one single goal: to prove to all those skeptically frowning men from the climbing club that we could do more than they could. That 3 girls were capable of assaulting Peak Seraphim, treacherous and unassailable, without their guardianship, their unnecessary advice, and their condescending smiles. Peak Seraphim was not the highest, but the meanest mountain in the range. Its routes constantly changed due to rockfalls, the weather was unpredictable, and local guides whispered about strange sounds emanating from the misty crevasses, even on windless days. That's exactly what we needed, not just to conquer but to tame, to make a statement once and for all. The first 3 days of the ascent were perfect. The cold, lung-searing air, the crunch of fern under our crampons, absolute silence broken only by our measured breathing, and the clink of ice axes. We moved in sync like clockwork. Samantha, the leader, with her nerves of steel and an ability to read the terrain like an open book. Miranda, our living compass and meteorologist, with ears always perked up and a hypersensitivity to the slightest changes in atmospheric pressure. And me, Katie, in charge of equipment and belaying. We didn't speak unnecessary words. Every gesture, every glance was understood without explanation. On the evening of the 3rd day, we made camp on a small plateau known as Seraphim's Smile. It was the last more or less flat area before the final, most difficult push to the summit. Above, only a vertical ice wall and rocky ridges sharp as razors. We were alone with the sky. So close it seemed you could reach out and scratch the glassy surface of the emerging stars with a fingernail. It was then that the silence cracked for the first time. Miranda noticed it first. Unpacking her sleeping bag, she froze with a strange, puzzled expression on her face. "Hey, Samantha, is this yours?" She was holding an old, worn Zippo lighter with an engraving of an eagle. The engraving was crude, deep, as if carved with a knife. Samantha, wiping the lens of her camera, turned and frowned. "No, and you never had one like that. Too brutish for you." "Definitely not mine," I snorted, lighting the gas stove. "I don't smoke." We exchanged glances. A faint shadow of bewilderment slid across our faces but quickly dissipated. Probably someone from a previous group had dropped it. "It happens," but "it happens" quickly grew into "what the hell?" While Miranda was making dinner, I reached into the common backpack for a chocolate bar and bumped into something hard and cold at the bottom. It was a folding knife in a leather sheath. The blade was long, narrow, perfect for anything but tourism. It smelled of steel, oil, and something alien acrid. Guys, my voice sounded a bit higher than usual. I pulled out the knife and placed it on the ice next to the lighter. The silence in the tent became thick, ringing. "This isn't funny anymore," Samantha said quietly, her gaze sweeping over both of us. "Whose is this?" My negative gesture and Miranda's headshake were sincere. We had an ironclad rule in our team: no extra weight, especially something as useless and dangerous as this. The shadow of bewilderment thickened, turning into a light but obsessive anxiety. We tore through all the backpacks and found more. In Samantha's pocket, where she kept her energy bars, was an empty pack of Marlboro cigarettes. In the side compartment of my backpack, where there should have been only wet wipes and sunscreen, a dirty, worn-out keychain with a skull image. The items were old, used, carrying the imprint of some absolutely alien, unpleasant presence. They were foreign, and they were with us. And then the phone rang. The ringtone was sharp, shrill, completely unlike the melodies of our smartphones. It came from the pocket of a backpack with food, discarded in the corner. We froze. Miranda slowly, as if in slow motion, reached for the backpack and pulled it out. It was an ancient, battered Nokia, a brick model with a small monochrome screen. It vibrated and rang in her hand, illuminating her frightened face with a deathly blue light. "Where did this come from?" I whispered. "My father had a similar one about 15 years ago." "I don't know," Miranda answered in the same whisper, looking at the screen.
"The number."
"There's no number. Just unknown. Drop it," Samantha said sharply. Her face had paled. "Just throw it out of the tent, now." But curiosity proved stronger than fear. Miranda, unable to look away, pressed the answer button and put the device to her ear. She didn't say a word, just listened, a second then another. Her eyes became perfectly round, wide with horror. She jerked the phone away from her ear as if its body had turned red hot and threw it on the tent floor. "What? What was it?" I cried out. He's breathing," Miranda forced out, her lips trembling, so heavily, hoarsely, as if through a torn throat. And then, a whisper. "He said, 'I'm watching your little light.'" An ice cube rolled down my spine. We all looked at once at the thin canvas of the tent, beyond which lay only the impenetrable blind mountain night. "It's someone's stupid joke," Samantha almost shouted, trying to regain her leadership and control. Her voice trembled, betraying her. Probably one of the guys from the club planted this phone with some recorded message. "A satellite relay, I don't know. They want to scare us into turning back." Her words sounded logical, too logical for this soul-chilling situation, for this ancient phone in the digital age, for these foreign things. We tried to convince ourselves of that. Ate dinner in silence, choking down tasteless porridge, turned off the stove, lay down in our sleeping bags, but no one could sleep. The phone lay in the middle of the tent, black and silent. We looked at it like rabbits at a boa constrictor. And then it came to life again. Not a ring. A sharp, abrupt SMS sound. The screen light flashed, illuminating the tent ceiling. We held our breath. Another sound. And another. Messages poured in, one after another. Miranda, lying closest to it again, obeying some unhealthy impulse, picked it up. Her fingers trembled. "Well," Samantha hissed. "Your yellow tent is like a pustule on the mountain's face." I gasped. Our tent was indeed acid yellow. "Miranda, stop rubbing your left eye. It itches because of the altitude anyway." Miranda gasped and pulled her hand away from her eye, which she had indeed been rubbing for the last half hour. "Katie, the lace on your right boot is untied. Last time you almost died because of that." My breath caught. Last year on Elbrus, I fell off a simple ridge precisely because of an untied lace. Only the three of us and the rescuer, who later scolded me, knew about it. It wasn't a secret, but it wasn't public information either. "Drop it," Samantha yelled, rolling out of her sleeping bag. "Drop it, Miranda." But Miranda, hypnotized, continued to read, her voice breaking into a whisper full of tears. Samantha is afraid of heights. She never told anyone, but she is afraid, especially when she looks down at her left boot. Samantha froze as if she had been hit over the head with a rifle butt. Her face twisted into a grimace of pure, undisguised horror. It was her secret, the great, carefully concealed secret of a climber who is afraid to look down. She had confessed it to me only once, drunk in tears after her first serious ascent. I hadn't told anyone, and I certainly hadn't told Miranda. This was not a prank. This was something else. Something that saw us, heard us, knew everything about us, right now. Samantha snatched the phone from Miranda's numb hands. She didn't read the new messages that continued to come in with an obsessive clatter. She threw the Nokia forcefully against the tent floor, then grabbed it, unzipped the tent, and hurled it far, far into the night. We heard it tumbling and hitting a rock somewhere below and falling silent. A tomb-like silence settled in the tent, broken only by our intermittent, rapid breathing. "We need to leave," I whispered, and my voice sounded hoarse and unrecognizable. "Right now, immediately. Are you insane?" Samantha tried to pull herself together, but her trembling hands gave her away. "At night? On this terrain? It's suicide. Staying here is suicide!" Miranda almost shrieked. "He's somewhere here. He's watching us." "Who is here?" Samantha screamed. "A ghost? A yeti? Who, damn it?" Her scream hung in the air, and then we heard it. Scrape. Right outside the tent wall. A clear, unambiguous sound of a crampon biting into ice. A step. One, then a second. Someone was standing outside. Right at the entrance we froze, not breathing. My heart pounded in my throat, ready to jump out. I saw the whites of Miranda's eyes burning in the dark, full of animal terror. Samantha slowly, centimeter by centimeter, reached for her ice axe. The steps moved away, circled the tent, leisurely, methodically, like a predator checking a cage with prey. We sat, clutching each other, unable to move, until those measured, scraping steps faded away in the distance. Until dawn. We didn't close our eyes. We sat, backs pressed against each other, gripping our ice axes, and listened to the silence, which was now filled with thousands of threatening sounds. Every crack of ice, every gust of wind made us flinch. With the first glimpse of a grey, murky dawn, we began to pack up frantically, feverishly, silently, without looking at each other. All our ambitions, all our records evaporated. Only one instinct remained, to run, down, away from here. We crawled out of the tent into the icy, bone-piercing wind. Fog lay over the plateau in thick, milky swirls, reducing visibility to a couple of meters. We were in the center of a small milk tent, beyond whose walls something unimaginable lurked. "Rope up," Samantha commanded, her voice hoarse with fear and lack of sleep. "Quick, I'm first, then Katie, Miranda last. Not a step to the side. No solo mobes." We clicked the carabiners, checked the rope with trembling hands. I prayed that Samantha, with her fear, wouldn't let us down now. But there was no other choice. We moved down a steep, icy couloir. We walked slowly, by feel, almost blindly because of the fog. Every step, every strike of an ice axe echoed in the silence with a hollow, treacherous echo. I didn't take my eyes off Samantha's back, trying to breathe in time with her breathing. From behind came Miranda's heavy breathing. We walked like that for maybe an hour, maybe two. Time lost all meaning. The fog didn't dissipate but only thickened, becoming wet and sticky. And then we came to the most dangerous part of the descent, a narrow cornice, the Devil's Bridge as we called it. A rocky ledge about 10 meters long, with vertical walls on both sides. The only way to cross it was with your back to the abyss, pressing against the rock and moving sideways one at a time. Samantha stopped, looking at this ominous path. I saw her shoulders tense. I can't, she whispered, and there was real childlike panic in her voice. "I can't turn my back to the abyss. Samantha, you have to," I said quietly but firmly. "There's no other way. We all go like this. I'll be watching you. Everything will be fine." She turned, and I saw tears in her eyes. She was on the edge. "He's here," Miranda groaned from behind. "I feel him. He's watching. Her words acted on Samantha like a whip blow. She straightened up sharply, clenched her teeth. Okay, one at a time. I'm first. She slowly, incredibly carefully turned around, pressed her back against the rough rock, and began to move. A step, another step. Her face was distorted with effort. She looked straight at me, seeking support in my gaze. I nodded to her, trying to project a confidence I didn't feel. She had already passed more than half. Only 3 or 4 meters remained, and then her left crampon slipped off a small ledge. She didn't fall, just jerked sharply, trying to maintain her balance. But that instant movement, that shift in the center of gravity, was enough. The rock under her feet, undermined by time and frost, broke off with a crash. I screamed. Samantha threw me a wild look, full of absolute terror, and disappeared over the edge of the cornice. The rope tightened like a string, jerking me forward. I dug my ice axe into the ice, braced my feet, trying to hold her fall. The pain from the jerk pierced my entire body. The carabiners creaked under the unbearable load. "Hold on," Miranda screamed, rushing to me and grabbing the rope. We hung over the abyss, connected to our friend only by that nylon thread. No sound came from below. No scream, no moan. Only the whistle of the wind in the crevasse. "Samantha!" I shouted, my lungs burning. "Samantha, hold on. We'll pull you up." In response, a sound came from the fog below. But it wasn't Samantha's voice. It was the same hoarse, stifled, torn whisper we had heard on the phone. It was quiet, but it cut through the howl of the wind and reached us with frightening clarity. "Goodbye, Samantha." And the rope suddenly went slack. Too abruptly, too easily, as if the other end had simply been cut with a knife. Miranda and I, still holding the dead, unbearable weight, tumbled backward, hitting the rock. Silence. Only our intermittent, sobbing cries. And the whistle of the void below. He was here. He wasn't just observing. He was participating. He cut the rope, or he simply waited for the rock to break off and whispered his farewell to us. We lay there, unable to move, digging our fingers into the ice, into the stone, clinging to a life that no longer had any meaning. Our little light had gone out, and the darkness had finally come for us, and in the fog very close by the ice scraped again. A step was taken, then a second. He was approaching.